Well, welcome to another session of Climbing the Summit, and I'm your host, Adrian Davis. And today's topic, we're going to be looking at the future of strategic account management. What's working now? What are the new demands that are coming? And how can organizations best navigate these future demands? I'm really excited about the guests that we have in studio with us today. Some of you will recognize our first guest. James Robertson is the president of the Summit Group, and I'll have him come in and introduce himself. James, welcome.
Adrian, thanks for having me again. A pleasure to be with you. President of the Summit Group, we work with companies across the globe in elevating strategic account and strategic selling performance.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for joining us today, James. And alongside you will be the CEO of the Summit Group, and that's Phil Styrlund. Phil, welcome to Climbing the Summit.
Thank you, Adrian. Good to be with you. This will be a lot of fun. Thanks.
Absolutely. And also, I'm really thrilled that we have the CEO of SAMA, the Strategic Account Management Association. And Denise, welcome.
Thanks so much, Adrian. I'm just delighted to be here. I am sort of overwhelmed with the changes that are going on in strategic account management right now. I've been here for 2 years. Prior to that, though, 40 years at IBM, where I was in sales and sales leadership, even a little bit of sales enablement. I was a SAM and led an industry group, and I am just never seen anything quite like this. Yeah. So I look forward to our conversation.
Very good. And Phil and James, maybe just for the benefit of the audience who might not know your background, you guys have deep, depth experience similar to Denise. Can you just comment a little bit on where you're coming from?
James?
Yes, I think everyone at the Summit Group, we've come from a practitioner's perspective. So we've been in role, actually managing, leading global and local strategic accounts. And the other thing is leading programs, CAM and SAM programs. So that's sort of our background. So we like to say it's got to be pragmatic. You've got to be able to do it. Theory doesn't pay the bills.
Very good. And Phil?
We're business school for sales and SAM, and always have been. And to James's point, everyone in our firm is here because we love the work. This is our life's work. And that's why a conversation like today it's just fun. It's just fun to be with like-minded people.
And our other final guest is Harvey Dunham. Talk about being pragmatic and you said theory doesn't pay the bills. Harvey's out there dealing with SAM's strategic accounts. Harvey, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Harvey Dunham. I'm the Managing Director of Strategy and Marketing. I've been with SAMA for 4 years, and that's following a 35-year career with Schneider Electric, where I started as a sales engineer. I finished as a global solution VP. And along the way, I was a SAM. I started up 3 different SAM programs and led those programs, and had a variety of experience as well as the general manager supporting the SAMs and president in the 2 countries. Wow. So I've seen it from all the different perspectives. I was executive sponsor of a Schneider Global account. So I've seen it from all the different perspectives. And obviously after I retired, I decided I still had some petrol left in the tank and thought I would join SAMA, and this is my way of giving back. So it's a delight to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. Look forward to the conversation.
I really do look forward to the conversation because of the depth of experience. And Denise, when you introduced yourself, you said, over 40 years of experience, and you've never seen anything like this. And maybe we could just use that as a jumping off point. What are you guys seeing today? And Denise, if you could comment first in terms of what's working. And Sam, I think, first of all, those organizations that have invested in a SAM program are way further ahead than those who haven't. Any thoughts, comments on kind of where we are today?
Yeah, absolutely. And a great observation that those people who are investing in their SAM program now are ahead. As I look back over the 40 years in the industry, and although we've had economic recessions, we've certainly had challenges, nothing has really kept us out of the game as much as this. A completely different set of pivots we needed to do in order to make things work. I would say the one thing, and this is probably obvious to everybody, is to be human first. That came from one of our members who was telling us what was important to him. And it was really be personal. And, you've got to maybe put your company on the side for a few moments and really interact and understand what's going on. So as simple as that is, it allows you to get in the door and understand what their legitimate business challenges are and how they're faring. So, as simple as it is, I would say be human first. And then I would begin to say, you know what, you need to strike up a mutually beneficial relationship, an initiative that is obviously important to both of you.
I really love that. And it's in a way, it's kind of a shame that we have to remind each other to be
It
human
is.
first.
Yeah.
It is. Isn't that so true?
But I think you're right. This has necessitated that need. And Phil, you've built your whole company on this concept of being human, really caring, understanding what your customers care about. Can you maybe chime in?
Well, before we even start talking about Sam and all of this, I couldn't agree more with what Denise has said. And I would just offer two simple thoughts. At a human level, to Denise's point, whoever you are, wherever you are not alone. Everybody's struggling with these strange days. If you're not struggling, what's wrong with you? But I think as human beings, we can handle a lot of things if we know we're not alone. I know that sounds simplistic, but it's not. No. You're not alone. And the second thought is the best days are ahead. In life, in business, and in SAM. And I don't say that in a happy talk, naive way. I say that because I believe COVID has been what I call the great humbling of the planet. And I believe our best days are ahead of us because of the humbling we're getting now. I mean that from every molecule in my body. And I don't just say that in a naive way. You're not alone, and our best days are ahead.
And I really appreciate that. And I think sometimes in the heat of battle, you might forget that you're not alone.
It's hard to remember that right now.
Through a tremendous turmoil. But just the second point that you made, can you just repeat that?
Well, let's take this to a SAM level. I believe the best time to be a SAM is now and going forward because it's never mattered more.
Okay.
Because as we try to rebuild this global economy, it's going to be the alliances and the collaborations between the major corporations in the world. And that, my friends, is SAM. That's strategic account management. So this is our moment. This is our time. And there's never been a better time to be in this vocation, this calling.
And Harvey, you've been around for, you've got decades of experience. You've seen a lot. What are your thoughts about what Phil just said, that there's never been a better time to have this vocation and be a part of this calling?
Well, 4 months ago, everybody's playbook for running a company, for being a SAM account plan blew up. Mm-hmm. It vaporized. And now everybody is in the same place. I would say every company and every individual in every company has been brought to the same level.
This is the great humbling that Phil speaks of.
And they're having to work themselves through this.
Yeah.
But your customers also blown up. Their business is blown up. Their demand levels have changed. Everything that's going on for them has changed. And some of these things are really dramatic. I mean, for example, something that I've felt for years was that the supply chain answer to everything was to globalize your supply chain. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, we're hearing lots of talk out there about customers needing to localize their supply chain to reduce their risk of the global supply chain for a myriad of reasons. The pandemic, shortages, also sanctions, and the trade issues that are happening back and forth between China and the US as an example. There's a lot of things that are driving this. And that means that there's a tremendous need for our customers to create new value in ways that they haven't imagined and in many cases never done.
Well, so maybe, James, that's a great point for you to come in on, to Phil's point that great opportunity, the best days are ahead. Harvey saying like everything's blown up, so there's opportunity everywhere, and not in a superficial feel good kind of way, but in a very substantive way. Maybe your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think to Phil's point, everyone on this call is the world's changed fundamentally. And then as an organization, we ask ourselves, how do we have to respond to that? What are the new competencies and skills that we need to build to be better in the future and to enable our customers to perform? And some of those skills are very much the same. I would say we don't have to sort of reinvent all the wheels. But I think there are some new skills that are becoming far more apparent organization-wide, and obviously that then comes down to the individual. There are some things we're going to have to do differently, and how we think differently as well, I think needs to maybe shift fundamentally. So the world's shifted, a lot remains the same. The fundamentals of building trust, creating value, I don't think that fundamentally is going away.
And being human, as Denise actually started off with. Denise, I sense you might have a comment on this.
Well, I was just going to add on, and something Harvey said prompted this about it's every individual. And I'm reminded about those people that are successful in this time are reaching out to every individual. So as you think about the contacts you have in your client, it's more important now than ever to continue to work with each contact and new contacts, people you may not have been, engaged with much in the past, because their organizations are changing. So the broader those relationships can become, I think is critical right now. And I think that's what I've seen as one of the successful points. People who have continued to contact it, periodically, weekly, daily, find a reason to go contact an individual at your client.
Denise, you're spot on. And one of the things that we've seen as the outcome of this great humbling is what I call the reset of receptivity. And to your point, maybe customers that in the past have been a little reticent or at arm's length suddenly have been humbled. Right. And they are dying to find out what's working.
So at all levels, isn't it, Phil?
At all levels.
Yeah.
And more than ever, we're seeing this hunger to tell me what's working somewhere else.
Right. Great.
Harvey, thoughts on that?
Oh, I just think of a good example. A good friend of mine was saying that he was working on a project, and he ended up being able to speak with the CEO of his customer. And over about 4 days, they had 3 or 4 exchanges via, as we're having this meeting, about virtual meetings, Skype meetings, rather spontaneous. And the CEO was delighted to have these conversations because they had the time on their hands. What the Sam was calling about was important. And they were just able to iterate. And literally what the Sam said, something that would have taken somewhere between 4 and 6 months happened in less than a week. Unthinkable in the past. Unthinkable.
Wow. So I think this. I think, Phil, to your point earlier, this optimistic approach and looking for opportunity and looking for opportunities to create value. I think all of that matters, and to really connect. I think what worries me is, when this thing hit 4 months ago or so, everybody kind of went into a state of shock because, to Denise's point, we've never seen this before. We've never seen the global economy shut down. The inability for people who specialize in building relationships to be unable to travel, to be unable to be in front of their customers. 4 months have gone by. We've kind of got our head around the virtual world. And I think there's, quote unquote, you hear this new normal. I think there's something to that. There is a sense where we come out of the state of shock and we begin to cope with the way things are. And we get used to this new world. I think what worries me is if people think that this new normal is going to be stable, that there's going to be more change coming, more unprecedented changes coming in the future. And maybe I could get you guys to weigh in on this. And in no particular order, but what are your thoughts about the new demands that you might see on the horizon that SAMs could be, and those who are responsible for SAM programs, that they could be preparing for now, so that no matter what comes at them, they will truly be ready? Any thoughts on that? James, I see you kind of nodding your head.
Yeah, I think we're having a number of conversations with our clients. I mean, Sam is grounded in, Denise, to your point, in relationships. And what we're seeing, funnily enough, is if you've had good, strong, trust-based relationships in the past, those carry forward.
Right.
But if you're looking to expand and start conversations with new people, now you're doing that in a different environment. So I think there's some very interesting dialogue around how do I build trust when I'm not having that true face-to-face interaction that many SAMs have been used to in the past. So I think this is quite a big shift. How do you build trust in a virtual environment? And I think there are some new skills associated with that, really listening. Denise, I loved what you said about putting the human first, because I think if people believe that you are putting them first, that they'll hear that over the internet.
Right. And James, to your point, and Adrian, you kicked this off well, that the one thing we can count on is it will change. Again, we don't quite know how it will change again, but we can pretty much guarantee that is going to happen.
Yeah.
So the new demand on the SAM, I think, is to be even more relevant than he ever could in the past. Mm-hmm. The more you know right now does make a difference. Absolutely. They talk to different people, different organizations. They could bring insight that maybe they weren't comfortable doing before. So building those skills and learning more about your customers' top initiative, top priority, whether it has anything to do with your product line or not, you got to be aligned with that top priority.
Yeah. Denise, if I could jump in there, because I was just having a
Yes.
conversation last week with a SAM, and we were talking about their account strategy and plan and the value proposition that went along with that. And I listened, and it was a great articulation of relevant value. And I asked the question, I said, would this still be relevant? Would this still be of value to the client? And she paused and said, I actually have to go back and probably revisit and have another conversation with my stakeholders, because even last week, this has changed. Right. And so I think there's an interesting dimension there, that what was of value and relevant days ago might have shifted. Right. So again, what does that mean for the SAM?
Let me ask you this, more from a personal perspective. Will all SAMs today be able to make these shifts? Or is there a certain type of thinking that maybe is innate to a SAM, to an individual, where they naturally think strategically, they naturally think holistically, maybe they naturally think of others first, and they really care about their customers on a human level, as you said, Denise? Are these things maybe intrinsic? Or do you think, as the future comes at us really fast, we can train up our SAMs to navigate and show up appropriately in this new world?
May I offer a couple of thoughts on that?
Absolutely.
In my opinion, and this is based on some research that SAMA has done in the past, the ability to think strategically is something that you're born with. Mm-hmm. If you don't have it, we can't teach it. It's something we can give you exercises to do, and perhaps you can find people to help you in that area if that's an area of weakness. But I think that that's really important. And your ability to interact with people also was something that I think is developed at a very early age. In my mind, those are the things that SAMs have to bring to the party.
Okay.
I think that's
go ahead. I was just going to say the part that they have to the part that they have to leave behind is preconceived ideas. Like, I must be physically present in front of the customer to be able to get a deal done. That was a preconceived idea and a best practice for 35 years in my experience, 40 years if I count SAMA, and it blew up 4 months ago.
Your point is so valid, Harvey. This is no time for intellectual narcissism.
Right.
I really believe there needs to be some mind shifts, back to your question, Adrian. And one of them that I've talked about lately is to seek clarity over certainty. This is not a good time to be certain. This is a good time to seek clarity, because I believe the future will reward clarity but will punish certainty. And part of being that strategic thinker that Harvey talked about is to be able to suspend solving, to not be a solveaholic, to listen deeper, more deeply, so you can be real-time relevant, to your point, Denise, to be relevant in that moment. So I think it is going to create a need for some what I call mind shifts as we pivot to this future.
And maybe to go back to Phil's earlier point that, you're not alone if you're going through this, I wouldn't mind if we could just spend a few moments talking about the SAMA community. To me, it's a phenomenal community. The original vision for SAMA, where it is now, Denise, where you want to take it. Maybe we could just talk about what this community does mean or should mean or could mean to its members, and maybe for those who are not even a part of the SAMA community, but they realize they have to engage their customers in a much deeper way, and maybe they're thinking of being part of the community. Can we talk about a little bit about how we see the community helping its members navigate the future?
Great question. And there's so many things that I think we can evolve and provide our members and the community at large. I guess I would start with the whole purpose of a membership community is sharing. I call it the SAMA share, right? And the ability to reach out to other members in the community. And I don't think we're doing it often enough. I think we could elevate that now, whether it's one-on-one, you want to benchmark with somebody that is maybe a similar set of problems, or small groups where you could get together and dialogue like we are here. I really think that we should elevate that ability for us to communicate with each other during these times. So many ways to do it, but that is certainly as a broad scope and a broad brush on what I'd like to see do more.
From week to week, we don't know what we're going to be facing. So
Right.
to be able to build these relationships, and they're so easy to reach out to people in the community and have these small group discussions. I think that's fantastic. Were you going to say something else as well, Denise?
No. I was just going to say, there are ways we can do that. Training, conferences, a number of things that, we could chat more about. But I do think that sharing in some fashion will be critical for us to go forward.
Okay. And Phil, you sort of kicked off this thought because you said, you're not alone. Maybe your thoughts around the whole notion of community, even if it's virtual, and how we can help each other navigate through this.
I've always said SAMA is a recovery group for SAMs. Number one, to know whatever you're facing, you're not alone. Number two is to recover from the wounds that are inflicted upon you by your own company. Because I've always said your toughest customer is your own company. And so when you find out that you're not the only one getting beat up, maybe that makes you feel better. And third is to find out what's working in other places. I think those are the three shareables, back to Denise's point, that might be the most helpful right now.
And James, that's something that you said earlier about, what's working in other places. What have you seen, or can you comment on that ability to see, hey, this is what another industry altogether is doing and how that might be an innovation for us?
I first interacted with SAMA in '99 when at my previous company, we were starting up our SAM program. And I think that the real value that I got then, and that I would see SAMs and program leaders getting now, is that SAMA convenes the community. You provide the safe environment for people to come together, to have conversations around things that matter most to them. And the value of that right now, to Denise, to your point, to be able to have these kinds of dialogues, that's how we're going to bring clarity to where we're going and sharing those ideas. So I think it's sort of the true meaning of community is around common interests in an environment, a safe environment to share and discuss those issues and challenges. That's really the essence of SAMA in my mind.
Great. And Harvey, I've actually seen you in action where, a customer is struggling with something and they say, Harvey, do you have something on competencies or whatever it is? And you've got a plethora of resources so it's not just about sharing in terms of relationships, there's also resources as well. And maybe you could comment on that.
Yes. I mean, Sam has been collecting best practices essentially from everywhere. And it's from our training consulting partners, from our academics, from our practitioners. It's just incredible what's out there. And so, connecting people and, picking up on Phil, your advice of really listening to what the customer's experiencing and trying to figure out the best resource. And even I often am trying to offer them options, because some people like to read, some people love research, some people would prefer to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So, everything I learned starting from my first day of sales is still true. Listen to the customer, hear what they're really saying. Sometimes the words they're saying, you have to think about it later to say, what were they really trying to say to me? Because they may not have expressed exactly what they're feeling inside. But I think, for example, right now, pretty much everyone is afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is probably the dominant factor. And you can hear that fear in people's voice because they don't have certainty.
Yeah.
We can't see a year and a half, 2, 3, 4 years down the road. We're not even sure what's going to happen in November right now. So hear that, figure out what you can do for people and help them deal with what they're dealing with in the way that they want to deal with it.
This is very, very powerful. And it kind of takes us back to Denise's opening point about, show up and be human first.
Right.
But on this point, and maybe we could just spend a little bit of time on this before we wrap up, because I think Harvey raises a really, maybe the most important point here, is that because of the high degree of uncertainty, people are afraid. And often when we are fearful, we don't think straight. The amygdala hijack, where we're not thinking clearly, we're not thinking straight. Maybe we're not confident to make decisions that we should make. I wonder if you guys could maybe just comment on the role of fear. What's at risk here if we get things wrong? Is there a way that we can manage our fears? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think what Harvey's brought up links to what I believe is the highest order value that a SAM can bring right now. So stick with me on this. What Harvey's just described is what I call the absence of certainty. There's just a giant absence of certainty right now. So, as everyone's saying, it's important to have a company that, as one of our clients said, is in a state of permanent pivoting. And I know, Adrian, you and James interviewed a gentleman called the liquid organization, this whole notion of creating this incredibly agile organization. But if you're going to be pivoting, how do you know where to pivot? The answer is by listening to your best and brightest customers. And hopefully that's called your strategic customers. And how do you do that? Through your SAM, bringing the voice of these best and brightest customers back into your own company. So this is what excites me the most, is the highest role that a SAM can be right now is to be the great navigator by bringing the voice of these bright customers into your own company so they can pivot with purpose in the absence of certainty.
Wow, that's so profound. And I think that we can't pivot everywhere for everybody.
Right.
So being able to identify who are our most strategic customers, to be able to listen strategically to them and pivot accordingly so that we're always relevant to them, I think that's the name of the game here. James, any thoughts on that?
No, I think that interview we had with Arun was very powerful in the sense that agility is clearly one of the competencies that a SAM and organizations are going to have to be really good at, because if we're not certain on where we're going, we have to be able to adapt. So I think that's critical.
So would you agree with me, or sorry, Denise, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to add on to something that James had said in the very beginning about investing in new skills And so one of the things we can do is to try to invest our time and our energy into building some of these new skills. I know that Summit and SAMA, we've created a virtual plethora of items out there that you could go see. There's webinars every day from somebody, but really kind of figuring out where you need to deep dive and take advantage of the moment.
Right.
I think it's, it's investing that energy where you could be most productive.
Right on. And in terms of investing, a lot of people are not spending on travel anymore, so
Right.
budget can be reallocated to invest in developing these skills.
Right. And some of it's not even monetary. Some of it is, and some of it is
Time.
deciding that you're going to put your time and energy there.
Right.
Right.
And it sounds to me really like, and tell me if I'm off here, that perhaps the most critical role in a company today is the SAM. That becomes the ear of the strategic customer. Thoughts on that?
I totally agree. I'm sorry, Harvey.
Well, I was going to say, customers need support. They need, and one of the values, and it was touched upon earlier, and forgive me, I don't remember, James, if it was you or Phil who brought this point up, but or maybe Adrian, it was you, because companies, suppliers see multiple different customers in the same vertical industry, they can actually be the communicators of what best practice is and what different people are doing without giving away trade secrets and obviously revealing confidential information. But they can really bring that external view in that companies don't have, because we all know companies get really focused on their own business and their own thing, and they struggle to look up and see outside. So the SAM has a tremendous opportunity to learn what's happening with the customers that they're serving and bring those best practices back. And, I think the other thing, back to this business about fear and it's difficult to make a commitment right now to say what's right. And I had a boss say one thing to me that was really good. We were in another time, this was right after the global economic crisis, 2009. It doesn't seem that far away suddenly. And he said, we're going to do this forever for now. Could be 2 weeks from now, but we may change because we learn something new and we have to move. But I'm looking, we're trying to hunt and navigate and find the right path. And we're probably going to make some mistakes, which you alluded to, Denise, but we're going to make some decisions, and we're going to keep looking and listening, and we're going to pivot and adjust as we need to be able to take advantage of what's out there. So I think that somehow this all comes together.
Beautiful.
Harvey, we find very often that senior leaders get easily wed to their point of view. And I call it intellectual glaucoma. And the only way it's not right or wrong, it's just human nature. And the only way to break through that is, again, voice of the customer channeled through the SAM to overcome that glaucoma, so you're not wed to your perspective.
Absolutely.
Maybe a final comment from each of you, a final piece of advice. Think of people struggling with organizational inertia, struggling with perhaps not aligning with the right customers or having difficulty aligning with customers. Back to Denise's point about being human and Harvey's point about, the fearfulness that has gripped many, many people. Maybe we just quickly go around the horn. Final piece of advice. Any thoughts that you have that just a takeaway from this conversation? And James, I'll just go in the order that you're on my screen. So I'll go James, Phil, Harvey, and then final word.
Yeah. So I'll start, and it's just a brief story, if I may. A strategic account manager that manages the relationship between a large healthcare company and Northwell Health, which is based in New York City and Long Island. This hospital health system has dealt with over 15,000 COVID patients, probably the most in the world. And the CAM represents a healthcare company. And then when they went in, this is her language, she said there was no roadmap. Northwell Health didn't know how, as the epicenter for COVID, how to deal. There was no treatment protocols. There were no real clear discharge protocols. And the CAM brought the team in, some of the clinical medical experts, and they've worked with Northwell Health to build out the protocols of how to treat and save lives from COVID. And then just last week, I heard the CEO of Northwell Health wrote a letter to the president of this company, saying, thank you. Together we're stronger. We wouldn't have got through this if it wasn't working this out together. In my mind, that's the essence of co-creation. There was no roadmap, no solution. So there is, I think the lesson there is lean in, be proactive. You don't have to have everything certain in front of you, but if you really can engage with the customer, lean in, we can solve, and our clients and their customers can solve these massive issues and problems. So that story in a way sort of illustrates to me the spirit of SAM.
It really does. Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. Phil?
One of our clients said a couple months ago, and I'll use her exact words. She said, when this is over, we're going to remember which suppliers tried to sell to us and which suppliers tried to help us. And that says it all. How do we want to be remembered right now? Because customers don't want to be sold to. They want you, the SAM, to align your company to their business model to help them through the storm. And so the mind shift here is from a business development to a business continuity mind shift. How do you make your company a business stimulus plan and align it directly to the business model of your customer? That's SAM.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Harvey?
I think the thing to the advice I can give, especially to the SAMs, is that the solution may not lie in the usual places. And you may have skills and capabilities that you don't even know that your organization has, or your suppliers have, or your partners have. And you've really got to be creative and look, because I think, James, your example made me think about this. They probably didn't have a piece of paper that they could send to the hospital for them to read and say, you have to do this and this and this. They went out to their community and they figured out a solution. And it might not have had anything to do with what their company necessarily does day to day to make money and do business. And that's okay, because they will remember that SAM forever. Forever. And so you have a chance to be remembered. This is your moment. This is when the great SAM shine.
Beautiful. Love it, Harvey. Thank you. Denise, final word to you.
Yeah, excellent points. I think that I would say to the program leader or the SAM, first of all, to prepare. Make sure you're ready and you know what needs to be done. But then I would leave you with the old Nike phrase, to just do it. Let's make sure that we don't become complacent and do nothing.
Right.
I think somebody said, don't waste a crisis. So it's like we need to do something during this period of time to really establish how we want to go forward with our clients. So I would certainly say take action.
Yeah, that's great, because that complacency can become part of the culture, and that's death.
Right.
We want that bias for action. This has been wonderful. You guys have been so generous. Really appreciate it. If you want to find out more about the Strategic Account Management Association, the website is strategicaccounts.org. That's strategicaccounts.org. And if you want to find out more about the Summit Group, the website is summitvalue.com. Summitvalue.com. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much, Denise, Harvey, Phil, and James. Really appreciate your insights.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.